All right, welcome back to Pints and Politics in the off session.
Yeah.
And episode 31.
I know. Well, it's the off season for politics, in the State House, but it is opening of football season. So
yeah. Which in the South, that's more important than politics. I do believe. I think in the South, our presidential election is pretty much already chosen, except for maybe Georgia.
Yeah, right. It's college football and church.
Yeah.
It's a religion down here for sure.
Yep.
Now, we got off to a shaky start. For our team.
At least y'all started. Clemson didn't seem to start.
Man.
Well, let's thank our sponsors before we get going too far. Comer Distributing, once again.
Yeah.
And today's pint
is Highland Brewing out of Asheville, North Carolina. We're just drinking the classic Gaelic Ale.
Yeah.
And, they always have descriptions when you're drinking this kind of crafty beer or, your non-Bud Lights. Your number one favorite.
It's got that hippie look to it, like the hippie clothing line. What is it? Patagonia?
Yeah,
on
right.
the bottle.
But it's a, I don't know, man. It's amberish, malty. It's got a little bit of a sweetness to it, but
I'm getting to where I can drink about any beer, but then again, really the only beer I'm kind of drinking is
these fancy ones now, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty good. It's good. It's a good fall weather beer. It does seem a little heavier. It's not like our poolside beers we were drinking earlier on in the podcast, but.
And Highland is an independently owned, family-owned brewery.
I think.
I actually went to a wedding there.
Oh, really?
My cousin was married there.
Fancy.
Maybe.
Must be the fancy side of the Guff family.
Yeah, he was married there. I was about to say he wasn't married there, but yes, he was married there.
Are you sure that wasn't the bachelor party, maybe?
No, I had two cousins, two brothers got married, very short time period together.
To each other?
No. I mean, we know Asheville does those types of things, but
but okay, let's turn this away from the ditch. Got to mix
the Southern and the liberal together there,
So yeah, back to the Saturday religion, which is college football. Let's talk about our team's performances yesterday. I know this is a Pints and Politics, but man, I tell you, the noon game. And I was surprised that y'all kicked. I mean, that is a marquee matchup, right?
Yeah.
I mean, number one,
they're
Georgia.
Picked years ahead
number
of time.
14, Clemson. And again, but just storied programs, right, for each state.
Well, they claim it's a neutral site, but I mean, it's in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I actually got offered a ticket to the game, and I was like, yeah, I can't go.
But it is like 2.5 hours for each team, right?
Yeah.
I mean, coming up from Athens for the Bulldogs and
I think it's like an hour
on 85.
From Athens at maybe 2.5.
And depending on when Clemson left, if they skipped the 85 traffic, they could get there in about 2 hours.
Well, they get state trooper escorts, I do believe.
Oh, well.
So they probably don't have to worry too much about all that.
So, yeah, I didn't catch a lot of y'all's game. But, I mean, it was like 3 at half.
Yeah.
So it seemed like a defensive struggle. It looked like a classic first game for the offenses.
No, nobody, I think Clemson had, 5 punts in the first half? It was just constant, not moving the ball. First downs being given up by penalties.
I'm about to say, I did watch the first series, and it looked like they had a set of, say, 10 or 15, scripted plays.
Yeah.
The first one looked like an RPO or something, but I saw Klubnik roll out. He literally threw it. And, again, it was a little low, but the guy should have caught it and picked up 5-6 yards, drops it.
Yeah.
And then the penalty. And then another drop by
Williams
a guy.
is about the only receiver that seemed to be getting open.
Yeah.
And they seem to be going heavy with the run with Maffa.
Yeah.
Because Georgia's defensive line is not as big as it was in the past. I think, previous years they had only allowed 80 yards a game, and then last year they allowed 115 or so. So Clemson's game plan was obviously to run the ball and wear down the defense. Unfortunately, it appears that Clemson's defense gave out first.
Yeah.
In this wear down.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it was 6-0 at half.
Yeah.
So one score game, man, and y'all are right back in it or winning, But so I was traveling for the USC, the University of South Carolina, and the Old Dominion game that kicked off at 4:15.
Man, that was worth the ride.
Oh, and it was a hot one down there in the bowl that we call Columbia, South Carolina.
Did you not go up in the box?
I did briefly to enjoy some AC, but then I went back
into the stands.
And then we had the lightning delay. But back to y'all's game. It looked like y'all were in it the whole time, but then the third quarter gave up 14 points. Looks like they scored late in the third quarter to go up like I think 20-3. Y'all got a field goal there. But it just seemed they put another 14 on you in the fourth and just got away from you. 34-3. Man, total offense. I thought our offense was pretty minimal yesterday. Y'all had 189 yards of total offense.
Lowest offensive production of the Dabo era, I think they said, since 2008.
And Klubnik, 18 of 29 for 142 and a pick.
Yeah, that's all the little
18 completions for 142. What's that, like 5 yards?
Yeah, well, about
Pass?
7.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. It's all the little dumps, and that goes back to whenever we were talking last week. I was talking about Tua. He just never seemed to move the ball downfield.
Yeah.
And whether that's receivers getting open, Williams seems like he can get open. He's got the speed. But he does he just seems to drop it, or I don't know. He seems like the main target for sure. But even with our tight end, I noticed our tight end coming back to the ball instead of at the line of gain. And
but
just didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Some of the positives was that's the number one team in the land, Georgia, who y'all are facing, right? I mean, we were playing Old Dominion, not the number one team.
And I think the game was closer than the score indicates.
I think it was either a mental just giving out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Once you get beat down like that and you've been pushing hard for three quarters to score and you're not scoring, you're like, man, we just gave up a touchdown, like it's over.
And you got to think that defense had to start wearing down, getting tired.
Yeah.
Right? If the offense isn't getting first downs and yardage, they're always out on the field, and I didn't even look at time of possession. But good news is, man, y'all's defense tackles well. They seem to get guys the first half, which I paid attention to. It seemed like if they had a guy out in space with the ball, y'all were making the tackle, the first tackle. I don't know what happened in the second half, but that was sort of a positive there. Also, the other positive, y'all are playing App State next week.
Well,
at home, at night.
Georgia's star player wasn't even in the game.
Yeah, Etienne, yeah.
So that worries me a little bit. I mean, that's Travis's little brother, and he's considered one of the best backs in the country.
And again, I don't know what he got arrested for, and I'm not making light of it. But the old Spurrier adage, you got to get Georgia in the first 2 weeks because some of their players are on suspension.
Well, I mean, I think people followed that whenever Spurrier was coaching USC.
Oh, that's great. So 0-1, and I tell you right now, atop of the ever-strong ACC football conference is the old Ramblin' Wreck, 2-0, baby, followed, by SMU. What?
Well, we'll see how it goes as we start getting into it.
And then Cal and Duke. If that starting four teams of Georgia Tech, SMU, California, and Duke, and Louisville doesn't scream mighty football conference, I don't know what does.
Well, we will see by the end of the year. I mean, you've got Miami. Did Miami beat Florida? I know they were winning.
They beat the brakes off them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got
Miami's down there, too.
Miami finally has a quarterback, which they haven't had in 2 decades.
Yeah, Miami. And, man, college football is always exciting when the U is back. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I mean, y'all got some.
We've got Miami. We've got Florida State, which did horrible last week.
Against the Ramblin' Wreck, baby.
Yeah.
Number one in the conference.
Yeah. But it's early.
Week
1.
It's early.
Yeah. Like you were complaining about the Gamecocks and them looking bad, and we're on the group text and getting all of those messages back and forth and everyone complaining. And I was like, hey, I think y'all just passed our offensive total in the first quarter.
Yes.
But the problem is the Gamecocks, to me, were playing the old Georgia Tech offense.
It did look like option. A lot of... Right.
And, I mean, Sellers ran the ball for more than 20 times? There's no reason your quarterback should ever run the ball more than 20 times.
Well,
even in a triple option.
I think we're going to have to. I think it's going to be a lot of RPO.
Shoot.
Nick
Harbor needs to go ahead and transfer to Clemson.
Hey, Lenoris
if you don't have somebody that can throw the ball to you, go ahead and move over to Clemson.
Hey, man, Lenoris Sellers, 22 carries. 22. Now, some of those might have just been because he couldn't find somebody and he
I
didn't
think.
want to take a
Well,
sack,
I don't think he was reading it, and we discussed that a little bit beforehand. I think he has all the talent in the world to be great, similar to a Cam Newton and Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
The question is will he? Is he trying to go through the system and taking the easy way out, and instead of making the read, just keeping the ball, or is he actually learning the system?
I think, this season we're going to find out a lot about not only Sellers but the team in general. But
Tom Brady had a good. I don't know if you've seen. He was talking about it's unfair to these rookies coming in nowadays because they have no system and the league is simplified. But the same thing with college. Whereas you used to come in and you learned a system, and you learned that system heavily to where the quarterback could be the general and make calls and make changes. And now they basically say, okay, this is what our quarterback's skilled at. And if you line up at the line and it's a deep pass, even if the defense is saying you're not getting this deep pass off, they run it anyway.
Yeah, right.
Instead of the quarterback being the field general.
Yeah. I was at that game. Man, it was hot. It was.
Columbia.
Man, it was balmy, man.
Muggy.
90-something degrees at kickoff. The good thing is kicking off at 4:15, it got gradually cooler. Man, I tell you, but we had a lightning delay in the first half. It might have even been the first quarter. So everyone had to get out and get onto the concourse. The whole student section just went back to tailgating.
Yeah.
They did not come back.
Seen it. I seen the whole corner was just gone.
Yeah. So I tell you, and then when you need your fans in the second half at the time it was a tie ball game, 16-16, nothing.
But if your students aren't behind you, then who's going to be behind you?
And then over in my section, I think myself and my buddy were the only people standing up, clapping, or trying to when
screaming,
they say
"Go Cox!"
When they say,
you and your buddy.
When they say, it's third down,
Yeah.
And I'm the only one getting up, and I turn around, and literally there is no one, and I'm like, get y'all's asses up, people, man. And I just think, as fans, we were back on our heels. That Old Dominion had just tied it up 16-16. So there's a little bit of shock.
It's kind of like those clips that you see where how hard it is to be a Gamecock fan because every year it's your year.
Yes.
And I actually think you'll have a really good chance this year. You've got a top 20 recruiting class.
Yeah.
And to have all of that talent on your team, the question is what can Beamer do with it? He's a great recruiter, but so is Dabo.
I know.
And I've always questioned that about Dabo is on the coaching side on whether he's a great play caller or whether it was Chad Morris or Venables or whoever coordinators were that were making the calls,
He has had strong coordinators.
Whenever we were winning national championships, our coordinators were making more than our head coach.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
From the university pay.
Yes.
Yeah, but Dabo probably had some other deals, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure New Spring had it on payroll somewhere.
Man, you hear that?
I mean, is it not true?
But, yeah, so, man, we got by Old Dominion 23-19. It should have been more than that. I think we ran a fake field goal in the third quarter, converted it for the touchdown, got called back for a penalty. It was just things like that.
Those penalties are what kill you.
Oh.
And you can't afford penalties when you're playing Georgia.
But
you can against Old Dominion. You should be able to.
And I can't remember if it was Kilgore or Fortune, but we had Sellers popped out on a run and had, picked up 5 or so yards. And the credit to the defensive player, popped the ball out. They scooped it up.
Yeah.
Old Dominion runs back. And guess what? Harbor makes the tackle, pushes the guy out of bounds at the 10-yard line or something.
So he had more tackles than he did catches.
Yes, that's right. Harbor, right? And literally they're going for the touchdown, and we pick them off in the end zone. So that saved us in the end of the game. The tip pass that we intercepted to end it, thank God. But that could have been bad. That could have been bad. Social media. Clemson fans, Carolina fans are always very watchful of the Facebook posts or the tweets.
Well, that's what's so funny. It's I find myself rooting for Carolina.
Yeah,
and it doesn't take but a couple of trolls to see their comments. I'm like, all right, screw y'all. Like, y'all are struggling against Old Dominion. Like, I don't even want to hear it.
Hey, we have a mutual friend who's a Clemson fan, but he's very touchy. He's a little sensitive. And he was already going off on Facebook this morning about how, we got our butts kicked by Georgia. And I'm like, man, we got our butts kicked by Georgia for the last 5 years, man. But I don't think it was by 31. Just saying, Schmitty. I know you're out there. I know you listen. You're one of the two.
Well, do y'all play them this year?
No.
Yeah.
No, we get LSU, Ole Miss, Bama, Oklahoma, y'all. I don't know if y'all will be in the top 25 by the time we play y'all, but
well, I think Ole Miss is going to be a strong team.
Yeah. They beat the brakes off Furman.
Even Saban was talking about that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was Furman, so they should beat the brakes off of them. Isn't that more of a female college anyway?
Furman?
Yeah.
The Paladins?
Okay. I thought it was more of like a girl-to-guy ratio, kind of like College of Charleston.
I mean, Winthrop was, but not Furman.
Yeah.
Furman, I think, was like a religious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way to know your university stuff.
Well,
you know. If any of y'all work for Furman, reach out to Guffey for a tour.
Hey, I barely know my way around York Tech. All right?
Yeah.
I am going to Winthrop for the Young Republicans is doing a debate, and they're talking about national issues. So they wanted, I guess, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats.
Okay.
So they've got Nikita Jackson, who used to be on city council.
Yeah.
I think she's going to be on there. Dr. Holder from Winthrop.
Okay.
And then Gary Simrell is going to be on there, and then they asked me to be on there. And
is it just like a panel discussion? Or?
Yeah, I think it's just really discussing the politics of today.
Cool. That should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just happy to get up there and talk. If they're college kids, will actually show up and listen, because that's the hardest thing, is getting them interested in politics instead of following whatever TikTok is telling them to follow.
Well, I mean, you're pretty active on TikTok, aren't you?
No, not at all.
You're pretty active on social media, though.
I am, but not TikTok. I'm old. I'm on Facebook.
And speaking of your social media, a lot of the ire that you get is from our own local York County GOP.
Yes.
I know they're...
Evidently, I've even made some national headlines because they had the March for Kids in D.C. this weekend.
Okay.
And evidently my Mean Girls post was a topic of hot discussion up there because they had the Moms for Liberty National and chapters everywhere going up to some of the people from South Carolina.
Or were you being...
Depending on who it was. So evidently every state has a group of Mean Girls. It just happens to be in York County that we ran into ours.
You should be able to get some royalty if they want to start, making that like a fundraising thing.
I would just get these random pictures because evidently Mean Girls was showing in D.C. So I'd get these random pictures from people taking a picture in front of a Mean Girl sign and sending it to me.
It was the same thing in Columbia. Remember, they were having like the sort of the off-Broadway show of Mean Girls?
Right, whenever all that happened.
At the Koger Center while we were discussing that earlier this year.
Which they haven't been the Mean Girls lately, so I have to... give them that. Maybe it was just the politics of trying to get Jackie
I think so.
involved. And
I think so.
Like I said, in my opinion, cross some lines. But they've got one of their own running for school board now.
Okay.
And so as you were talking about the local GOP.
Yeah, you went to this past meeting.
Yes. I'm trying to get more involved to attend.
And we should. We should all, as our delegation, even though I don't think they support us. Even though we're Republicans,
I don't think that they only support whatever Jeff Davis out of Greenville's telling them to support.
Yeah.
That seems to be the problem. That's the reason I've called them Nazis. They don't want to hear any additional voices.
Right.
They only want their message shared. I mean, even on the email that we got just recently shows minutes of the meeting, not the one that they invited Rob Harris, which is not part of York County, to come speak instead of a York County representative.
To give the two listeners some backdrop and context to some of the strained relationship between, say, us as elected Republicans to the State House from York County, 46 and 48, we found out that our local York County GOP invited a fellow freshman legislator. Rob Harris is from, the Greenville, Spartanburg area?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay. And So he came in with us back in 22. He sits on 3M with me, and he's got a medical background. I think he is.
He is a nurse.
Yeah. And he was the featured speaker by our local York County GOP to speak on the budget.
Which he's the guy who votes against everything. I mean, you even see Freedom Caucus members going over to him.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, man, you need to be for this. Or
and again, so when it got brought up to us by somebody that, hey, y'all's local GOP is having a person from another county.
But this has been going on for 2 years.
Right. To speak on the budget. Is he on Ways and Means? And I was like, no. Yeah. Well, then why is he speaking on the budget? I said, probably because he agrees with whatever the York County leadership team thinks about the budget, right?
Yeah.
And here's just the irony of it. Senator Harvey Peeler out of Cherokee County.
The chair.
Who also has part of York County in his Senate district. He is the chair of Senate Finance.
Yeah.
He has a major role in the state budget. A major role. Okay? Not consequential, not irrelevant. A major role.
Like the most powerful man in South Carolina role.
Yes. Yeah. So if there was someone, if I'm Larry Barnett as our local chair, if I am wanting to know facts about the budget, maybe
they don't want facts.
Hey, tell us.
They want their facts.
Yeah,
like the liberals.
Tell us the good and the bad and the ugly about the budget, right?
Yeah,
because it's not all pretty. There are some things in there. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
but I want to increase pay for teachers. I want to increase pay for law enforcement. I want school resource officers in every school. I want to fast track money for
stop men
bridges.
and girls' bathrooms.
Yeah, correct.
Pull books out of libraries that don't deserve to be
girls'
there.
bathrooms in our public schools from folks who are having some gender identity issues from walking in, biological males walking into girls' bathrooms. That's in the budget. We got a proviso in the budget because we were dealing with this locally, right, at Rock Hill. So it just amazes me that you don't invite Chairman Peeler to come speak on a budget that he
or just anyone in York County.
Yeah.
The only people that they have invited to speak was David O'Neill the week that we passed the budget, which that's what the minutes were sent on. And I showed up late. David was speaking. And then I asked to speak, which he gave me 2 minutes to speak because I requested. And I explained the good things that we passed within the budget through the provisos. Got an applause for that. But the whole narrative was already like, we didn't vote for the budget because this is corruption and, people padding their pockets and waste of taxpayer money. It's not even talking about how the appropriations were cut in half.
And again, government spending on wasteful things, how we can better spend tax dollars, how we can cut things, how can we reduce taxes on our people, all important things, right?
Well, the whole reason Rob Harris came there is because their big push right now is that it is corrupt for us not to take whatever the appropriations are and just divide it evenly amongst every rep throughout the state. So regardless of whether you vote for the budget or not, each rep should be able to get their own appropriations for their district if the budget passes.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's having your cake and eating it too. You want to get your money to bring back to your district and still vote no against the budget.
I don't know. Again, it's just if you really want to find clarity and find explanations of why certain things are in a budget, I would ask Harvey Peeler.
Yeah.
More than I would Rob Harris. Fair?
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Okay. And so this sort of gives some context for the two listeners out there, to our local GOP. It's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating.
They don't care.
You and I were talking prior to the show about an email that our local party sent out insinuating that our state GOP is misusing funds. So when I called the leadership on it through email, I was basically told, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So then
no one knows except for them because you haven't talked to Jeff Davis to enlighten you on whatever you need to know.
And so again, it's just this classic game of, hey, everybody, this is what you should be scared of, and that's who's responsible for your fear, right? It's just that fear game. And so, and that was my point. I said, hey, why don't we, you're the chair of the York County GOP. Why are you asking us or insinuating all this stuff? Why don't you tell us where the money's being spent? Because that's your job.
Right.
That's your responsibility as members of York County GOP or GOPs at large in the state. Shouldn't you be telling us where that money's being spent, not just throwing out this insinuation and then just letting the rumor mill go?
Well, it kind of goes back to where we are in politics. It's easy to play victim instead of just doing your job and blame it on everyone else instead of you stepping up and doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, we see that quite often.
Yeah.
You claim corruption, but yet you don't show corruption.
Bring receipts.
Right. And it's funny. All you have to do is say something, and everyone wants to pick it up, and especially whenever you have these echo chambers.
Like POS alcoholic.
Yeah.
You know, you can just say things.
Just say whatever you want, and people want to pick it up.
Slander.
Yeah. But you don't have the balls to put somebody's name in who you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just frustrating. And for voters, it's got to be just as frustrating, if not very, very confusing, because you don't know who to believe, right? There's so many.
The problem is I think that they're listening to whoever they hear first.
Or the most.
Well,
right?
I mean,
if you keep repeating a lie, then it must be true.
You have members that talk about, man, my family called me. Like, why are you such a rhino? Why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? Just because they're listening to whatever's out there. You know, I mean, it goes back to just like that radio station that's popular up in Greenville, The Word.
Oh, yeah.
You know, whenever they were telling people to call me, it was my bill just because I'm on judiciary.
Or regs or whatever it is.
And it's like, you idiots. Like, I'm the one who wrote the bill. Why do you think I need pushing?
Or I did love the fact that we were being, somehow folks were being told that the gender affirming care bill for minors or whatever, that we were going to allow that to fail or something.
Yeah.
And we had already passed it out of medical subcommittee, the full 3M. And it was going, at that point, it was then going to the floor. And then I start getting just inundated with phone calls and emails about why are we, masquerading to be against it, but we're going to allow this bill to fail. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've already voted. We've already passed it twice.
It's the same rhetoric from whenever the school board redistricting was coming up, and we're literally arguing on the floor, and people are blowing our phones up saying, why are you working with John King? And wanting to? It's like, where are you getting your information? Like, literally, check
the live feed.
Yeah.
Guffey and Heath are up debating,
yeah,
John, about the single districts. No. We still need the two at large. So yeah, it's a frustrating relationship, but it was good that you were able to go. I was out of town. And so we should just dig into maybe what occurred this meeting.
All right. So whenever we went to the meeting, or I went to the meeting this week, first of all, I thought it was only an hour long, so I left a little bit early. But whenever I came up, of course, they do the committee reports, and they're talking about legislation, but they were talking about bills that, of course, are all dead, that haven't been heard. So we've got to rewrite, and they're looking for volunteers. But one of the ladies who came up, her name was Lori Moore, and she talked about going to the national convention. Obvious big MAGA supporter. Mm-hmm. It appeared from her conversation, it started off, well, just before this, let me say, Larry Barnett, the chairman, was talking, and he begins to talk about how Drew McKissick is swamped, and
Drew McKissick being the state chair.
GOP chair. Then he proceeded to talk about Alan Wilson, how they asked him about something. Alan Wilson gave his opinion, but of course it's not going to be something in writing unless his whole people reply back to you. But, he just gave his honest opinion. And then someone else come back and said, well, no, you could do that. So Larry Barnett went back to Alan Wilson, and Alan Wilson's like, you can do whatever you want. Like, my opinion is just my opinion of where things could go. So immediately he starts blasting Alan Wilson as being swamp and saying, keep in mind this man might be running for governor, and y'all keep that in mind as it's coming forward. So, of course, I'm a little bit defensive whenever Lori gets up there to speak, but she starts talking about going to this national convention and how there was a meeting of voting, but yet Drew McKissick, who's the chair of the party, was not involved in it.
Okay.
So then McKissick comes up and says, no, we've got to have a meeting. They're like, oh, we've already met on this. He's like, no, I run the show. This is the way the state party operates, and we go by state party rules. So they get together. They have the votes. That lady said she wasn't included in a few of the votes, but she was told it didn't matter because her vote wouldn't make a difference anyhow. But then proceeded to say that Drew McKissick and Chad Connolly are the swamp and the reason that South Carolina was put in the back in the convention and nobody could see it. Just further in that divide. Now, I wasn't there, nor do I fully understand what exactly was happening to her, but it sounded like she was doing what Trump's team wanted her to do as opposed to following what Drew McKissick, the chair of the party, wants to do.
Okay.
And there's always that divide. We are not the party of one person. We're the party that the people have chosen, that the people have selected rules, and we must follow those rules.
Right.
And I think that's where the divide comes from. And they, point that out as being swampish. And, just because Robert's Rules of Order, then, you must be corrupt.
And we touched on this last week when it came to the Freedom Party down in the State House.
Yeah.
It just seems like they want to skip. The process is not for them. Right? The rules are not for them. They are the true patriots, and they are speaking for the people, and everyone else get out of the way. Right? And that's just immature. That's an amateur hour perspective, and just no respect for the other members. I don't care what party you belong to. Treating people with respect, kindness, all those types of things matters, right? Words matter. You can't call someone corrupt. You can't call someone a racist.
I'll call you a dumbass, but I'm not going to call you corrupt. Right. Like, to me, the evidence is already there if I'm calling you a dumbass, but
I won't say you're a dumbass. I say you may be acting like a dumbass.
I tried that argument with my wife whenever I said the B word. That did not work out, so I'd ever do the you're acting.
Come on, man.
That's not going to end up well. Just say what you mean.
Hey, the two listeners know what I'm saying.
What was that, the Key and Bill skit? I said, B. Then the wife just pops up.
Man, I would never even. No. Man, I was raised by a single mom.
But I tried to use that argument whenever I'm getting chewed out, and I was like, "Why are you acting like?"
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, "You called me that?" Like, no, I didn't. I didn't.
If you ever even thought about it, you're gonna get smacked. Just for thinking of it. As the cloud is starting to.
We don't usually say it until you get smacked, right?
But oh man, that's gonna be a good little tagline for this week's episode. When
we need to interrupt the Key and Peele little skit.
Yeah,
saying it because like, oh yeah, I said it.
So back to this meeting. All right, so you had Lori and some of that going on. Anything else? I mean,
then we had the school board races coming up.
Okay.
So the candidates now, granted, we have more than 3 candidates, but this is the York County GOP. So they justified the only reason that they allowed these 3 people to talk is because they're the only ones that have their dues paid. Now you have, say in Clover, you have Tracy Stiff, who has been a leader within the Republican women's group up there.
Yeah.
Now, is she going to be coming down to Rock Hill for York County GOP meetings constantly? Probably not.
Right.
Most of the people from up there don't. Even Peggy Upchurch, like you don't see her at the York County GOP meetings like that. But anyway, so they only invited 3 people, 1 from Fort Mill and 2 running against Clover, which just both school districts happen to be 2 of the best that we have within the state. So that becomes my frustration. Like, I understand the big push for Rock Hill school districts. And even from, the rhetoric that was put out during the campaign, during the State House campaign.
Yeah.
Fort Mill schools are good. Their problem, and the one lady who's running, Ellen Abramo, seems like a nice lady. I don't know a whole lot about her.
Right.
I think she might have been one of the mean girls online, but I'm not sure, so I can't clarify that. But the argument became, or she was talking about the school bonds being passed over the past few years. Well, that is passed by the people.
Yeah.
Not by the school board.
They vote on it.
Right. The people get to show up at the polls. Correct. And the argument I heard was, well, not a lot of people showed up. And some school board members were for it. Well, they are still just one person. They have one vote.
Right. And because I know in Clover that bond issue was a hot topic. It barely failed, once?
No, it passed.
No. This time.
Yeah.
But this was like the second or third time that bond came up, right? That referendum came up.
I don't know about in Fort Mill. In Clover,
and I'm speaking of Clover.
Yeah,
sorry.
Clover, it come up a few times.
Yeah,
and there was a big push. But Clover needed it to build schools.
Absolutely.
And if we would have
Clover
had
is one of the largest high schools in the state right now.
If we had the impact fees, which I've had that argument with many other conservatives because I was anti-impact fees. But whenever you think about it, it's truly just a Yankee tax. Like, if you're not, the only people that should be complaining are the people who aren't here or the builders. Because you're paying that impact fee to go towards the schools. Yeah. And whatever, let's say the impact study come back and said $18,000 is what it should be. Mm-hmm. Well, we voted to make it $4,000 based on Allison Love's recommendation during third reading. So we lowered it down. Well, that is a $14,000 difference.
Yeah.
And for every new home that's being built in one of the fastest growing areas, well, you have to make up that money if you've got to build a new school. So how do you do that? You have to pass a bond. Now, if you would receive less or receive more from the impact, that bond would have been a whole lot less.
In theory, yes.
Yeah.
But again, there is sort of a balance to what you're talking about, impact fees, bonds, whatever. $18,000, you got to think per house, $18,000. That may be non-economic, especially when you're talking about affordable housing, right? For developers. Yeah. And then if you raise that impact fee too high, you then have builders who won't come into the area and build, right?
We don't have builders building.
Oh, no. I'm just saying as far as economic impact of an impact fee. You got to think about what that will do to housing starts in your area. Now, if you want to stunt them, a high impact fee will do that, right?
Yeah, and especially if you're banning multi-family residents.
Right. But that can also then roll down to your realtors, right?
Yeah.
And then all your realtors now don't have houses to sell, so that impacts their household income. So there's just a lot of things that go on when it comes to impact fees just by y'all raising or lowering it. Now, I'm not advocating for or against. I'm not saying that at all.
They did that 10 years ago.
I'm just saying that's how government can gum up the works of, say, a quote-unquote free market, right?
Well, Fort Mill was the first to implement impact fees.
Yeah.
At $18,000 per home over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Nothing slowed. They needed it for the schools, and the only other option in order to keep the schools where they are and to be able to build would be bond referendums. Mm-hmm. Because bottom line is we don't pay enough in taxes to support our schools.
Right. Well, that goes back to your favorite piece of South Carolina legislation.
Act 388. Right? Yeah. We got that, and now you got to add in, so because of our bathroom proviso, Alan Wilson's been fighting that.
Right.
Well, that's going to make us lose if we go ahead and continue, and Ellen enforces that, we're going to lose 10% more of the federal funding.
Right.
So we've got to change our tax structure to ensure, because schools are one of those things that we should be paying for. Now, are we? I think many of our schools are admin heavy.
Absolutely.
I think we need to be paying our teachers more. I think we've got way too many
The
administrators.
dollar needs to make it to the classroom.
There's too many people trying to figure out what we should do next instead of just teaching our kids.
That sounds like having a meeting about a meeting.
Yeah.
Right. There's too much of that.
Yes.
It seems like you need to get more frontline folks, the teachers' aides, some of the folks that help kids who are struggling with certain subjects, that you can pull them out. I know special needs kids, especially with more and more kids these days coming up with autism or some sort of autoimmune stuff like that. I mean, what's the number now? 1 in 34 kids born today are on the spectrum.
I mean, you've got to see, this is something to do with chemicals, regardless of whether it's our
food, vaccines,
or,
whatever. Yeah, somehow it's entering their system.
And I found it very interesting. You know, I don't believe everything that Kennedy says, but during that Rogan podcast, whenever he starts talking about the implementation of the vaccines and how it was in the 80s, and then once they started forcing it, and the link of autism and special needs, and again, it is a huge coincidence, if nothing else.
And Robert Kennedy just seems to, I appreciate him running, right? And I appreciate what he's brought to the conversation on a national level. And I love how the lazy, and I'm not saying all media, but there has been some lazy media folks out there who just say that he's anti-vax. And it's not that he's anti-vax. He might be anti-mercury in the vaccines that carry.
And he made his career fighting the pollution that was polluting the Hudson River.
Correct.
And those chemicals.
Yes.
And he didn't want to have to do anything with this, but so many parents kept coming to him about the link of autism and vaccines that whenever he started to research it, he was like, man, this is scary. And he started researching multiple vaccines.
Yes. Well, it's like you and I have had that experience with mothers and families that have come to the legislature, and we've talked to them because York County has a strong presence about the fentanyl crisis.
Yeah.
That's why that was one of the first things we wanted to do was put a state trafficking of
I want it done this year.
With mandatory minimums.
Yeah.
Got that done last session.
Well, I meant
this session.
death by fentanyl.
No. Now, if folks are dealing in trafficking in fentanyl and it results in a death, that homicide bill has got to be a priority.
I mean, I think it pretty much results in a death.
Yeah.
If you're dealing
I mean,
fentanyl.
they are
it can
selling,
be linked to just about any death.
They're selling poison.
Yeah.
You know? And it needs to be treated as such.
Now, the basic drug dealer, not to sympathize with the drug dealers, do they know if fentanyl's in there? But whenever you got people like the guy in Lake Wiley that had the house and they're pressing fentanyl, they 100%.
Well, and I think that death by fentanyl that we had I think we had a House version, but the Senate version passed out of the Senate last year, or earlier this year.
We used it as,
and there was a knowingly clause in there.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to prove that if Brandon Guffey was a fentanyl drug dealer, if I was the DA, I would have to prove that you knew you were putting fentanyl in your drugs. So, that's got a burden to it, and proving it beyond a reasonable doubt.
And it goes back to not all drug charges should be treated the same. So I don't believe in mandatory minimums on drugs, but whenever it comes to fentanyl, I most certainly do. Yeah. And now we're starting to see these pharmaceutical companies prescribe ketamine.
What?
Like there is, you can do a virtual doctor's visit
for ketamine
and get ketamine sent to you, and essentially all they are is drug dealers with a lab coat. They're able to prescribe it. Yeah. And we've got to start holding doctors responsible. And this is why we don't get the mental health aspect that we need or other things through virtual visits.
Yeah.
Because you have idiots like that take advantage of it and just become drug dealers.
Yeah. I mean, case in point was the Matthew Perry death. Right?
That was
ketamine.
That was from a doctor.
Literally, Matthew Perry is paying someone to be his personal assistant. That person is then, whether it was corruption through a friendship or what. But
the doctor even said, I wonder how much money we can get from this idiot.
Yes. Like all the text messages that they found, it was 2 different doctors, and
And we're not going to be able to find any of that
Matthew
now
Perry's
with end-to-end
personal
encryption,
staff.
by the way.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's true. But I think once we start holding folks accountable and they go to prison for it, like if you had the whole opioid crisis, if they had to put a Sackler behind bars, even if it's a federal white-collar prison, even if it's 5 years, I guarantee you people would start acting right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Folks these pharmaceutical companies, those executives, if they knew they could be criminally charged, they'd think twice, I guarantee you.
Same thing with big tech.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
100%.
And I have seen where they are, I forget which social media company it is, but they are talking about suing or charging the owner of one of the social media companies.
Oh, really?
And this is still another country. I would have to look it up.
No.
I know
It
I've
was
got
Brazil.
it in my yeah.
Yeah. So Brazil has just seized the bank accounts of Starlink
Yeah.
because they're providing internet access. And Musk is like, yeah, no, I'm not. Because I think what happened was Musk had an attorney that was arguing his point, and the judge basically threatened to lock the attorney up for defending, I think, Musk's position. And so the attorney quickly left the country
Yeah.
before they could. So yeah, there's definitely there's a war waging on free speech. You know, as unpleasant as ignorant, phrases speech is, people still they're entitled to that.
I don't
freedom
disagree
of
with that
speech.
And I'm all for
Whether you call it
any
hate
free
speech,
speech.
Yeah,
Other than yelling fire in a theater.
right.
And except for whenever it comes to children. So there is Section 230, which keeps these companies from being sued, essentially, for anyone of 13 years or older for what's being put on their website.
Yeah, right.
Net Choice just basically argued themselves into losing a legal battle, and I think it was in Texas, by stating the judge ruled that by a company using algorithm, that is that company issuing their free speech. So now it is not protected under Section 230. So that is the company's opinion by using an algorithm. So if your child is looking for self-help because they're depressed,
Right.
and TikTok starts showing them suicide videos, now they can be held liable. Now, of course, this will be appealed, but
yeah.
it is literally using Section 230 against it. Now, I'm told there's going to be some very interesting software. So I've told you about Blacklist before, and this is something we hadn't talked about on the air. But his company is supposedly part of the iOS update that's coming out in September.
Okay.
And we will see if what he's talking about will allow controlling this a little bit more on protecting children. And controlling what content they can see, and considering algorithms are considered advertisements, that software controls all advertisements.
Okay.
So it allows the user to disable, and whenever it's teens, they can automatically disable it
Oh, gotcha.
as advertisements.
So, and again, the easiest, I don't know if it's the lazy parent or just a very active being I care. Obviously, we all care and love our kids, but understanding that these devices that we carry around in our back pockets are basically like a dark alley in a major city at 2 a.m. Again, my daughter doesn't have a cell
Or
phone.
walking home from school.
I mean, in
the 80s, we allowed all our kids to walk home from school, but
Yeah.
then, there was always a few that would get kidnapped.
and that's all. That was
And we
always,
had to learn better.
That was always my personal conflict with any sort of social media bill. Was being a conservative, I'm like, no, we shouldn't be controlling or creating regulations on these businesses and this, that, and the other. But then when you look at the data and you look at the numbers of children harming themselves, the suicide rates, all of those things, and then not to mention all the criminal activity, it was too big to ignore, right? It was too big to say, hey, we just got to parent better.
So here's some stats So we had a lot of people complaining about the proviso to give Ellen Weaver's group the ability to block cell phones in schools. So as we were talking about how dangerous these devices can be, 97% of students use phones during school.
Yeah.
Social media is nearly universal. 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds are on social media, and 95% of all teenagers are on social media. Teens spend nearly 5 hours a day on social media apps. 3+ hours of social media on a day doubles the risk of poor mental health, including experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. 83% of teachers support an all-day phone-free policy.
Yeah.
72% of high school teachers report cell phones are a major distraction. 50% of kids get an average of 237 notifications a day. A day. Some receive as many as 4,500 per day.
Yeah.
And
just
then,
depending on how many.
And then the basic things, you know, like phones prevent the face-to-face interaction,
Yeah.
right? And then we've got students not using, this is the last stat or two stats I've got. Students not using their phones during class wrote down 62% more information, and the rates of school loneliness has doubled since 2012.
What happened in 2012?
Yeah. So it's
and again,
the implementation
anymore,
of that.
right?
Yeah.
And again, this was innovative new technology, so we didn't have any of the historical data that we have now. But that's it. In that key factor of 3 hours,
Yeah.
Per day, it is that magic number. We have found that over a decade or so of having social media and then being able to understand the data.
And that's not even going into all the harm of,
right.
you know, the bullying or the algorithms.
Oh, right.
This is just basically a phone itself.
Yeah.
Which I've seen a new innovative.
Wait a minute. Did you say that the stat was the average teenager is on social media 5 hours a day?
Yes. On social media.
That's what I mean.
5 hours a day.
That's a scary stat.
Teens spend nearly 5 hours a day on social media apps, and that's from the American Psychological Association.
Yeah, that's a scary stat. You got to think 5 hours a day. Your kid
That's more than they're spending in school.
That's more than they're spending at church a week.
Yeah.
That's more. I mean, could you imagine if you had one-on-one time with each of your kids for 2 hours a day, right? What impact you could have on your child? 5 hours. 5 hours.
And the algorithms are deciding what your child learns.
Yeah.
So if they want to push to go back into if it's a communist agenda, if a socialist agenda, a Christian nationalism agenda, whatever it is, can be done by the companies and those who own it.
Yeah.
And that is the scary part.
It is.
And that one of the best quotes I heard this week was that a politician worries about getting elected again. A patriot worries about the next generation.
Yeah.
My fear is, what will our generation be if we continue to allow these tech companies to influence our children?
So, and again, that's where I wear both hats, right? Parent and then also legislator. As a parent, you know, that famous line at Tombstone, law don't go around here.
Yeah.
Okay. That does not go around in my house. It just doesn't. As a parent, man, my daughter doesn't have a phone. We do everything we can. She has an iPad now, but it's locked up with, the guns and the beer, right? So it is monitored. And don't get me wrong. I know she gets in some text conversations.
Yeah.
And I've told her before, hey, you don't have any privacy in this house.
Yeah.
So from time to time, I have picked up and read a group chat that's had some cuss words on it, and her and I sit down and have a conversation. That's just parenting. Now, as a legislator, if it becomes a public health issue, which it seems to me
right now,
it's apparent, right? And so when I first got elected, that was the first thing I started talking about was kids should not be getting on social media until, and I had to find the age. At first, I was like 18. Right?
I still think 18.
It's as dangerous or more dangerous than cigarettes.
I'm fine with them getting on social media at 16, but I don't believe any algorithms should be used until you're 18.
That is correct. Targeted ads towards kids, all
Correct.
those types of things. That's right. So, I don't know, man. It's just...
It's changing the way our youth think. And I'll go back to...
I think it actually will change, and we're going to find this out down the road. I think it's actually changing the biology and the size and shape of brains. It's developing certain parts, but then other parts aren't being used.
And some of the SEL teachers will kind of explain that too.
I don't know the science behind it. I don't know why all that works that way, but just reading some of the early reports on it, that's what they're finding, which is scary.
Well, I go back to whenever Gavin was 16, COVID hit. 15, 16,
Right.
somewhere around there is whenever COVID hit. Gavin came to me and he was very upset. And he was pissed because his brother wouldn't get the vaccine and he wanted to get the vaccine and I wouldn't let him just make the decision to get the vaccine. And it was all about, but it goes back to those algorithms and what was being shown.
Right.
And I really wish that he was alive right now to see Mark Zuckerberg come out with his letter stating that
we were
suppressing information.
Yeah.
Based on what the Biden-Harris administration was asking us to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that people are not looking into that enough.
Right.
And understanding that enough.
Yeah, man, no kidding. All right, so we're talking about Meta a little bit, about Zuckerberg now coming forward saying he was pressured to censor certain speech and all that type of stuff. I haven't even talked to you because I've been out of town a lot this week. What is your thoughts on, Meta had a big announcement. They're setting up a headquarters or a operational center
in
Aiken. And let me just go over the highlights. They announced, Monday or so, the 29th, that they were establishing the company's first South Carolina operations center, new data center, $800 million investment that will support 100 new operational jobs. So 715,000 square feet data center.
My initial thought was anger.
Optimized for Meta's artificial intelligence workloads.
Right. My initial thought was anger because I'm thinking, how do we allow Meta, a company that is so irresponsible in the way that they do business, how do we give them a deal to come here? Now, then I start thinking back to whenever I was on county council. And whenever these deals come before you on county council, these are FELOs, which stands for a fee in lieu of taxes.
Right.
Because of Act 388, we have to give these FELOs to attract businesses because we are one of the worst states to do business with in South Carolina. We would need to have all this economic development if it wasn't for Act 388 to begin with. But as those projects are going through, whenever I sat on council, often we never knew the name of the company.
Right.
A lot of times we would learn small details, but the economic development portion, you're learning how many jobs it is, but then they give it a project name and they say,
Project Stingray.
Project Stingray, Project Cobra, whatever it is. And, so as you're dealing with these executive session meetings and you're talking with attorneys, they still don't disclose the names of the companies.
Right.
It's anonymous because if an elected official knew that information, they could invest into a company or they could tell their friends about said company or they could ruin the deal for said company.
I was going to say,
if I knew that Meta was building a place in Aiken and my loud mouth, which we all know that I have a very loud mouth, was to come and say, hey, Google, y'all should open a data center in Aiken instead of Meta because at least y'all do a little bit better than what Meta does.
Yeah.
And then it costs Meta the deal, which turns around and they sue the taxpayers because that information is given out.
Yeah.
So the name was kept
I think that actually happened
anonymous.
with AOC and Amazon.
Yeah.
When Amazon
was trying to go into New York.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep those companies private. I am thankful that we are having tech companies come here because that puts us in the game. I'm a firm believer, as I said in my conspiracy theory, that data will become currency.
It is.
So I'm happy for data to be coming here.
Yeah. So I have a concern about the energy, and they're talking about, I think, powering this facility with some renewable.
Well, that's what they looked at.
Which is good. That's great. But it brings up that energy component again. So
this is why it's going to be our number one focus.
Yeah. And, listening to some of that energy stuff go on, I started looking and I actually posted it on my political Facebook page. Santee Cooper had to take at their Cross coal plant, they had to take down one of the, I think, turbines because of maintenance issues. They had something fall out of, anyway. They had to down it because of repairs and maintenance. And I was just like,
well, I mean, we've got,
and again, that's an aging facility. Yep, there's an aging facility there in Cross, and folks have got to understand, if we do not start investing in the power generation side of our energy, it's going to be more problematic when you have those extreme weather conditions like we had. What was it, 22 Christmas Eve? Remember that freeze that came? I think that was our election year, because I actually had people reach out to me about, Duke, I think, went offline for 30 minutes or however long it was. But anyway, just you and I hadn't talked a lot this week. Wanted to get your sort of opinion on.
Do you ever feel like so many things happen? Like, I know it's only been a week since we recorded.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's like, I know I did something that I'm just forgetting to talk about. But I know I've had the conversations over that. I could have sworn there's something else. But we've got a meeting coming up with Google. I've got a meeting coming up with Google coming within the next week.
Oh, yeah.
To discuss some of my ideas for online safety, which I'm looking forward to. I was trying to get to D.C.
Oh, were you?
D.C. had that March for Kids.
Oh, okay.
Which Tulsi Gabbard was one of the leaders of that, but they had all the groups, and it brought in the Moms for Liberty National Convention.
We haven't even talked about national politics at all.
No. But on that, Ashley Jones out of Florence, the Moms for Liberty lady, I know you and I have got to know her talking about policy because she's heavily involved in policy.
Yeah.
She won the Joyful Warrior Award.
Oh, really?
On a national level.
Oh, wow.
Which is...
Congrats to her.
I didn't know that was really a thing, but all those women, whenever I was calling them Mean Girls, kept saying, we're joyful warriors. Evidently, they weren't as joyful of a warrior as Ashley was, because she's the one who got the award. But,
wow. Awesome. Congratulations, Ashley. I don't know if you're the one of the two listeners or not, but congratulations. Man, a national award.
And out of little old South Carolina, too.
Right.
Out of all states.
Well, and just a programming note, we are announcing we're going to have another remote podcast that we'll be recording down in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yes.
We're going to go down. I think we're down there for an energy conference that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we just want to take the opportunity to...
I wasn't invited to the energy conference, but I'll come down for the podcast.
Hey, Crash. just wear your brooch. But
I need to come in and talk. No, I'll actually go down there. But one of the conversations I had is meeting on another podcast.
Oh yeah. We should possibly have
Donna Rice Hughes.
Yeah.
And she started Enough is Enough, which is one of the first advocates for online regulation back in the 90s.
Wow, back in the 90s.
And a lot of the things that we are fighting for now are the same things that she was fighting for then. But, she's been a pioneer with it. I'm going to jump on her podcast and discuss a little bit.
And she lives down in the Charleston area, right?
Down in the Charleston area. So I would love to get her to come by and at least visit us while we're doing the remote podcast. Yeah.
So we're hoping to have some colleagues join us, Representative Gary Brewer from the Dorchester, Charleston County area. Possibly, who else? Oh, Senator Sean Bennett from Summerville, my hometown. Hopefully he's going to be able to join us as well. I think we're going to get the mayor on as well, right?
I don't know.
He came up to Columbia, the mayor of Charleston, because he's a former.
Oh yeah.
He's a former House
member.
member.
Touchberry.
No. Touchberry is the mayor of Somerville.
Okay.
But Cogswell won that close race for the mayor of Charleston
to become a Republican mayor once again in Charleston.
Yes. Yep. So I think he's going to join us. May have some other guests as well, but we'll.
Now, did he used to be a representative?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Cogswell used to be a representative in the House. Left.
I always feel like an idiot because I don't know anybody.
I didn't.
And everybody
know.
expects you to know who they are, and I'm like, yeah, nice to meet you.
Hey, yeah, Heath Sessions, the non-politician. Yeah, same with you. We'll do that September the 13th, Friday the 13th, 4:00 at Holy City Brewing.
Ooh,
so
that's gonna be a tough travel.
Look forward to seeing our friends down there in the Low Country. What you got this week? I know. Hey, we got Labor Day, extra day off.
Yeah, all I'm going to be doing is playing catch up, getting back on some emails.
Yeah.
I got a phone call. I've got to get a few things together. John Walsh, who started America's Most Wanted, leads NICMEC. His 40-year celebration is coming up at the end of September, so I got a phone call from NICMEC. They want me to come up to D.C. for that. So, and, John Walsh and Chris Hansen often work together.
Yeah.
And so I want to go up there and kind of tour the facility and go through everything that they do out of the D.C. area. Now, NICMEC has set up satellites.
Now, tell for the two listeners, NICMEC is the National
Center of Missing and Exploited Children.
Okay.
So it started off with America's Most Wanted.
That came up in a Will Folks article from a few weeks back.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons the dumbasses in the Freedom Caucus want to spread that narrative that like I had something to do with RJ's because I work with NICMEC, but I'm not working on individual cases. I am working on
more like policy, more
sort of like NICMEC's not a government agency. They work as a in between, so they set up these sting operations. Yeah. So Chris Hansen's To Catch a Predator might be a NICMEC agent pretending.
Gotcha.
To get law enforcement involved.
I think I saw Chris Hansen on something. Does he have his own network now?
Yes, Blue Network.
Okay, True Blue or something like that? Okay.
So is it True Blue or Blue? I can't remember.
I can't remember either, but I just saw.
We did filming a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And he said that he's working on something more of a documentary style with it as opposed to a show.
Man, I tell you, Chris Hansen, if he pops out of anywhere you're at, you better just say no comment and run. I mean, seriously, because I
made the comment whenever he came to the house. Like I was like, oh no, I never thought I'd feel this way whenever Chris Hansen walked into my house.
I was checking into a hotel, and I don't typically watch a lot of TV except for sports on a TV. Right? You watch it on your phone or a
laptop
device, but but in a hotel, I was just flipping through, and one of his shows was on. And it was literally just, a setup thing where they got someone who they had was trafficking online with, I don't know what it was, but it was with minors.
Well, and NICMEC does some of that with ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children.
Yep.
I would love to be a part of that. So in my mind, whenever I'm dealing with teenagers that are being extorted, how do I make the biggest impact? And a lot of that is those phone calls. Like whenever we're in Columbia and I get those phone calls late at night and I'm dealing with people dealing with a mental health crisis or going through sextortion. The only other way that I could do better, and the way that John Walsh did, was John Walsh had his son kidnapped and murdered.
Yeah.
And so he started America's Most Wanted to expose these people, and him and Hansen are good friends.
Yeah.
So their careers have kind of been linked together through all these years. But I mean, he's celebrating his 40th year. He was a father whenever that happened. I would love to work with NICMEC to be that digital version.
Oh, right.
To try and catch these scammers and expose them.
Yeah.
And Chris's focus is more on his network.
Right. And I'm
everything
curious.
He's moving forward.
I'm just curious to see what you learned there. I mean, because Nick Meck obviously started probably as a physical, right? But now with physical crimes, like in the real world. But now because there's so much of this stuff going on online, like
that's becoming their focus,
right? So I'd be interested,
especially with AI and everything else. I mean, but to be able to track down these criminals and to have those tools, or to just be a resource that can bring all the agencies together. So, I mean, I'm going to give you this as an example, because this is one of the things I want to talk about Google about. Did you know that if you are a Homeland agent and you are searching, let's say we're searching Heath Sessions' profile, we haven't gotten a warrant or anything for you, because we're saying, hey, we might think this guy's bad, so we want to look into this.
Just checking out my online activity.
Correct.
That's open to the public.
Correct. Google will send a notification of legal compliance due to a target, and they send the end user to know. So they will send you a notification to say, hey, Homeland Security is viewing your information. This is before charges are brought. Right. So then it creates an entire problem. So maybe you're trying to just get some additional information for a warrant.
Right.
Maybe someone was talking to a child online, and they've got an IP address, but they want to find out a little bit more information about this person so they can serve them with a warrant. Well, whenever they start requesting that information, Google sends the person that they're researching.
Basically notifies the target
that Homeland or FBI or IRS is researching your account.
Huh. So, but again, there are some civil liberties involved there, right? There's due process. There's all of those things.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not an attorney, but
they shouldn't be able to get more information without a warrant than what is open information. The difference is these agencies are asking you to provide them with open information, not private information.
And then they notify
the person. So, I mean, if they need private information, then they have to serve warrants.
Yes.
And Google and Apple, Apple is the world's worst. I think out of all of, that was one of the arguments I had this week. Apple's reported less than 300 child nudity cases, ever. 300. Everyone else has reported, thousands upon thousands each year.
Yep.
Apple's reported very, very, very few.
And you're suggesting that's bad.
Yeah, I'm saying Apple houses more child pornography in the world than any other company. And they do it on servers within the United States. And they're not notified. Now, this is child pornography.
Yeah.
So for all of you that want to speak about privacy or anything else, I don't care what your privacy rights are. If you're exchanging a picture of a minor, then,
it's criminal.
Yeah. I'm under the mindset that pedos don't deserve to live. But you may be different. But I could really give two shits about your rights if you're exchanging child pornography.
Yeah. And I get that.
I don't believe it's your right to do that.
Yeah. And I get that gut emotional response too. That I'm getting it. If I know that someone is trafficking or exchanging pictures of minors for sexual purposes. Yeah. But I also want to slow down a second for the purposes of, first of all, getting it right. You know what I mean? Because you always read these horror stories of criminals getting off because law enforcement stepped over the line.
Did something wrong.
Right. So that fruit of a poison tree type thing.
Yeah.
That's one. Secondly, everyone deserves or has constitutional rights to plead the fifth, not self-incriminate themselves. All of the personal privacy that you talked about. That's not a speed bump, right? It is a right that we all have. And so we just got to, again, I'm not an attorney, but we do.
How do we add the right of just taking out pedos and not wasting taxpayers' money? That's what I would like to know.
It should be a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, I truly believe it should. If you're a rapist or a pedophile,
no.
I don't believe you deserve to silp air. I don't even want to hear your excuse.
I do believe.
I want to take you out.
I do believe after they're found guilty in court.
Yeah.
But now my emotional...
I'm working on my castration bill again.
Yeah, right. My emotional and human response is
Yeah.
right in line with yours.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm not an attorney, so
Yeah.
kill him.
or
I
Lord
ain't worried about
legislator. You know?
Like, that's the way I look at it. So, I mean, I'm not the one making the decisions on this.
Yeah.
And if I was asked to be on a jury for a pedophile, I'd be like, yeah, I believe they need to be murdered.
Yes,
Like, you
correct.
might want to take me off this because my views are not going to change.
You do not have due process. You have no constitutional rights.
Yeah. I'm not following those rules.
But yeah, no, I know it's a sensitive subject.
But to send those notifications, one of the other things I want to do, like Google sends your 13-year-old a email telling them that they can control their settings now, which includes disabling parental controls. So on their 13th birthday, if your
Come
child,
on.
yeah, if your child has a Gmail account, then they can send them a notification telling them, hey, you can update your settings with the links to it, which all the parental settings are in there. So they don't advertise disable your parental settings, but because of Section 230 stating that once you're above 13, then they're giving them that ability and
Get
they're
outta
absolving
here.
themselves
Get
of
outta here.
anything.
That
I mean, that's no different than Meta sending child pornography over their channels. Now, they know it's child
wait a
pornography.
minute, it's in encryption, dog. I don't know.
End to end. Okay, but here's the kicker. If they didn't know, then why the hell did they blur the image? How did they blur the image if they didn't know that this was child pornography to begin with?
Yeah.
And it says this may contain nudity of a minor, and then you get to hit the eye on there and still view the image.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that makes them complicit. They're saying, hey, I'm going to give you an envelope of a bunch of kitties.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not on me if you open it up.
That sounds like a
I
question
just provided the information. No.
for Mr. Robbins or
Yeah.
Mr. Mitchell.
So why don't we put me on the jury for Mark Zuckerberg and let's go.
There would be a potential for a conflict of interest. I'm not saying
No.
you're...
And let me elect the judge that we're going to appear before.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, speaking of judges, did you see, for the two listeners out there, we already got the JMSC report. Did you see the
I haven't
initial?
been through it all. So
Yeah.
I know one of the guys running.
Yeah.
I actually went to high school with him.
Yep. So this is the great thing about, I guess, getting some reps.
Yeah.
And when I say reps, I mean repetitions at electing judges. We've now done this twice. So now some of the folks that are back on the list are folks who we've already met.
And already vetted.
And
Yes.
and we've met them. They just weren't successful in their
And that's
their run.
typically, it seems like,
I think-
if you're a first-time candidate and you get put on,
Yeah.
that's odd.
Correct. A lot of times it's 2, 3, 4
Yeah.
times before you.
Yeah.
And God bless them. I tell you.
And it's
So-
a whole lot easier to select someone that you have established a relationship with because they've been through the process a few
Yep,
times.
and
you've had those conversations over and over and
Yep,
over again.
It's a familiar
You
face.
Yeah, you
have
feel more
conversations. Yep. So I think there's 2 running for, I think, Judge
Judge
Dana.
Hall's.
Yeah, Judge
Yes.
Hall's seat. He's retiring or has
Who are
retired.
the 2? I know Melissa was one of them.
It was 2. I thought we had 2 ladies. It was someone from, I believe, the solicitor's office. Was
Okay.
it Colston? I don't want to mess up.
Oh,
anybody's
Judge Colton?
name. Magistrate. She's a
Yeah, magistrate.
Yep.
Judge Colton.
Yep. Colton.
Okay.
And then there's
I can't
there's
remember
one
Melissa's
other.
last name right now. Both of those ladies, from what I know, are great people.
Yeah,
so.
stand up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, it's already. I know we're in the off season, but that's already been reported out. So we'll have some fun off season of sitting and talking to folks who want to be on the bench, and then we'll vote. Well, if we are fortunate enough to get reelected in November, we'll get to vote February or so.
Have you seen how your race is going? All right. You've
No.
got a Democrat.
Yeah.
I haven't seen much from him.
Well, I mean, he probably hasn't seen much from me either. I think
Yeah.
we all wait until after Labor Day.
Yeah.
Every
Getting about that time.
yeah,
So a lot more door knocking.
that's right. So
Once NFL season starts, it's going to be a little bit harder to record on Sunday.
Coming to a neighborhood near you, folks. I will be knocking on your door. So yeah, I don't get a lot of it seems like, say, like a Ralph Norman or maybe even like Senator Johnson or Clymer. they get invited to all these
Yeah.
panel discussions and this, that, and the other.
Or energy summits down in the low country.
I don't do a lot of that public speaking stuff. I prefer the one-on-ones, the small groups, things of that nature.
I think people are worried to invite me.
And I'll tell everybody, for the 2 listeners, if y'all have any friends who want to host me for a coffee, and there's 4 or 5 of y'all that just want to sit down and get to know the candidate or your current representative, just reach out. Let me know.
I'll tell you, the best is, so myself and Clymer, because we share so much of a district, we're trying to do like a town hall. It's trying to get the date, really, so we can answer questions and concerns and directly with constituents.
Well, you should come to Hoppin September 18th.
Yes.
We're going to try to do that around probably 5:30.
Yes.
And just talk about liquor liability.
It'll be fun.
Invited Will Kinney up. He helped with the past legislation that got bottled.
What time on the 18th?
I think we're saying 5:30.
Okay.
And Joe Gullidge is running Hoppin here in Rock Hill, and I think I've shared this personal story of he was getting a renewal and called me up and was like, "Hey man, my insurance went up like 5 or 6-fold." I think his first year was somewhere around like 35, and the first quote came back at like 155, and he didn't have any
claims or anything.
And
there should be a limit on how much something could raise like that. I mean, we have it on energy, and if we're mandating something like insurance, we should be able to control how much it goes up.
Right. So maybe when you're helping knock doors for Kamala Harris with price controls.
I mean, if the government's going to be involved in regulating. If the government wasn't forcing it to begin with, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Well, but
I think if you don't want to carry the insurance and you're going to risk your entire business.
And you and I talked about this on 10 episodes or so ago. We talked about this. Folks are leaving this market, right? When settlements and these jury verdicts are coming out with $60 million. But the good news is, and there's not a lot of good news on this front, but the good news is I think there are several states, one of them that comes to mind is Alabama, that did further defined that protects our small businesses, this being the bars and restaurants, that they define visible intoxication. And then if the bartender or server or establishment still serves, then they're responsible, right? So they narrow that. They're putting more onus on the person who's acting irresponsibly, i.e. the guy who's had 18 Jack Daniels, right? Versus the proprietor who might have happened to unknowingly served him his 18th, right?
Yeah.
You go to Applebee's and you crush 15 Jack and Cokes, and then you come to Brandon Guffey's establishment and have one, not showing any visible signs of intoxication, and then that irresponsible party goes out and kills somebody.
Yeah.
So trying to protect our small business owners that way. And they've seen positive results. They've seen folks come back into the market, so it helps on the supply side, and then it's also, I think, reduced their rating risk by half. So it's bringing the prices back in line just by that piece of legislation.
Okay.
Not an overhaul of tort reform, which I think you and I both agree we want to do.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a heavier lift.
Yeah. Oh, no, we need to stick to liquor liability first.
Right. So, and not boogeymanning insurance, right? I think
I don't know who to boogeyman. Is it the insurance or the attorneys?
I think
I keep going back and forth. They both boogeyman each other.
As Senator Johnson, I think, quipped when he came over and guest hosted with you, there ain't no good guy, there ain't no bad guy. There's just you and me, and we both disagree, right?
Yeah.
I think insurance, lawyers, and irresponsible bar owners can all be a part of the problem, but also be a part of the solution, right? So
True.
I think if everybody owns up and says, "Hey, this is a problem. It's affecting public health. There's too many tragic stories of drunk drivers killing innocent folks. Let's do something." And I think this is
and we see it just through our insurance costs. So.
Yeah. So
as just regular cars,
but yeah. So looking forward to having that in September. Man, good luck on your Google.
Thank you.
talk this week. And again, thanks for Comer Distributing to offering up Highland Brewing Gaelic Ale.
Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. It's, we talked about it. This is a good oyster roast beer. Fall, crisp weather, raw oyster, and chase it down with some Gaelic Ale. So.
Rednecks eat clams, not oysters. So I don't know.
All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Have a go.
Anything you want or who you want to be, you can be. Just remember those who make this life so easy.